Close your eyes and imagine a twilight sky blanketing the towering trees of Redwood National Park. A faint wind rustles through colossal trunks, older than memory itself, carrying whispers of stories that even the forest floors have forgotten. In the hush of that majestic wilderness, a young girl stumbles upon a breathtaking, impossible moment. A wild horse, shimmering under the moonlight like a living phantom, stands before her. She's lost, terrified, and on the edge of despair. Yet something wordless passes between her and this powerful creature, an unbreakable bond formed in an instant that will change both their destinies forever. Lucy Henderson was 10 years old when her parents first took her to Redwood National Park. Every summer, the Hendersons traveled up from their home in Santa Rosa, California, toward the mist-shrouded giants of the northern coast. Lucy's mother, Jacqueline, had grown up marveling at ancient redwoods, learning how their roots interwove underground in a secret tapestry of communal strength. Lucy's father, Dan, had proposed to Jacqueline amid those same towering monoliths, carving their initials into a fallen log as a testament to his love. The redwood forests were more than just trees and trails to them. They were living witnesses to a family saga. Lucy remembered the car ride vividly, windows rolled down to let in the crisp, cool air that smelled of pine, earth, and the brine of the nearby sea. She felt something thrill in her chest, a youthful anticipation that mingled with the sweet sense of belonging. This annual camping trip was not merely a family ritual, it was Lucy's chance to discover something new in nature each time. The redwood canopy always seemed alive, with beams of sunlight forming silent cathedrals, the ground soft with needles and moss. She'd spin in circles, gazing up at branches that pierced the sky, each spin dissolving her everyday worries like sugar in warm tea. That year, everything felt different. Jacqueline's eyes had lost some of their usual sparkle, overshadowed by an unspoken heaviness. Dan, too, seemed more protective, hovering near Lucy as if expecting some unknown disaster to arise from beneath the ferns. Lucy wasn't sure why. She sensed her parents were carrying a burden they hadn't shared with her. Perhaps it was a matter of finances, or maybe a small marital tension, though Lucy rarely saw them argue. Whatever it was, the redwood excursion arrived like a promise of solace, a place where the family's invisible strains might melt into the hush of nature. They set up camp in one of their favorite clearings, a place tucked off a less traveled path near the Prayer Creek area. The official sign read, Elk Prairie Campground, a well-known spot in the Redwood National and State Parks network. Lucy helped her father pitch the tent, diligently hammering stakes into the damp soil while Jacqueline unpacked supplies from the trunk. Later that night, they sat around a modest campfire. Lucy savored every crackle of burning wood, every flicker that danced on her parents' faces. The flames made them look younger, like newlyweds telling ghost stories and dreaming about the future. But Lucy couldn't shake the feeling of something unspoken lingering. When she asked why they had chosen a more secluded site this time, her mother offered only a vague smile, and her father's gaze dropped to the fire as though searching for answers in the embers. Lucy was too young to press the matter, so she brushed it aside. She had forests to explore, an adventurous spirit, and a heart longing for wonder. The next day dawned in gentle layers of fog and dawn light. Lucy wriggled out of the tent to find her parents already bustling around the campsite. After breakfast, Dan suggested they hike deeper into the woods. Jacqueline hesitated, rummaging through her backpack and double-checking water bottles, flashlights, and maps. Lucy, however, was ecstatic. She adored the primal hush of forests, the interplay of gloom and light across ancient bark. They set off with Lucy leading, skipping a few feet ahead as her ponytail bobbed behind her. Fate works in mysterious ways, especially in places filled with such raw, untamed majesty. Redwood National Park sprawls across thousands of acres, with well-marked trails and hidden paths that vanish into thick groves. Lucy was usually good about staying close. Her father always reminded her that if she went too far, the forest might swallow her up. But as midday approached, Lucy found a narrow offshoot of the main trail that beckoned like a secret invitation. It wound between towering ferns and beneath arches of twisting trunks. The canopy overhead formed a living tapestry of green and gold. Without fully thinking, she ventured ahead, weaving around logs and stepping across a creek bed. Her parents were momentarily distracted. Jacqueline needed help adjusting a strap on her backpack, and Dan paused to look back at his wife. By the time they turned around, Lucy was out of sight. Dan called her name, his voice echoing through the giant trunks. He heard only the subdued reply of his own echo. Jacqueline felt a prickle of worry climb her spine. They raced forward, scanning the edges of the trail, thinking Lucy must be right there. But Lucy had ventured far enough that she no longer heard them. The gentle wind, thick foliage, and an unquenchable childlike curiosity had carried her deeper into the wilderness, sealing the day's tragic turn. Lucy didn't realize she was lost at first. She followed the winding path until it ended near a small clearing, dominated by a massive fallen redwood. The forest was silent, except for the occasional bird call and the rhythmic drip of water from mossy branches. Lucy's wonder was replaced by confusion when she noticed no further trail. Attempting to retrace her steps, she found the path looked unfamiliar. Panicked, she spun, scanning for any sign of her parents. The forest felt larger now, the trunks more imposing, the shadows deeper. She called out, but her voice carried only a short distance before dissolving into the green hush. Lucy had never felt so alone or so small. Determined not to cry, she kept moving, but the labyrinth of identical trees and thick undergrowth offered no guidance. Finally, she sat on a log to calm herself and think. Her heart drummed behind her ribs. She remembered the rules: if you're lost, stay in one place. But the swirl of panic compelled her to do the opposite. She moved, hoping to find anything resembling a main trail. Hours passed, or so it seemed. Lucy's feet ached, and her mind buzzed with worry about nightfall. She rubbed her arms against the dropping temperature, tears threatening to escape despite her attempts at bravery. She whispered her parents' names into the silent gloom, but the forest offered no comfort. Then, as if conjured by some ancient magic, there came the faint sound of hooves on soft earth. Lucy froze. Her immediate thought was that a deer or an elk might be approaching. The redwood area was famous for its Roosevelt elk population. But this sound was heavier, more deliberate. She turned, and through a veil of ferns emerged a horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion with a dark mane that cascaded like a waterfall of midnight. Its coat gleamed even in the dim light, muscles coiled beneath its hide in fluid tension. Its eyes were wide and dark, reflecting Lucy's petite figure in a mesmerizing swirl of curiosity and caution. She gasped. How could a horse be wandering here, far from any ranch or stable? The Redwood National Park did have boundaries near farmland, and sometimes domestic animals roamed too far. She'd heard tales of wild horses in other parts of the country, especially in places like the Onaqui Mountains in Utah, but never here. Yet here it was, standing not 30 feet away, ears perked forward. For several heartbeats, girl and horse stood transfixed, like two puzzle pieces that accidentally meet in the chaos of life. Lucy's fear of being alone began to ebb, replaced by awe and a cautious hope. She didn't move, worried she might frighten it away. Instead, she spoke in a trembling voice. "Hello there, I won't hurt you." The stallion snorted softly, stamping a hoof. Lucy took a slow step closer. She couldn't help noticing how the horse's gaze seemed both fierce and gentle, curious yet guarded. An unspoken accord formed between them. Both were lost in some sense, both searching for something. Lucy inhaled deeply, drawing courage from the living presence before her. This wild horse was no idle wanderer. She felt destiny woven into its unexpected arrival. She stretched out a trembling hand, unsure if the animal would bolt. Instead, the horse remained still, cautious but not fleeing. Slowly, Lucy closed the distance until she could feel its breath, warm and alive against her open palm. She smiled through tears she hadn't realized were falling. In that instant, she didn't feel lost. She felt found. For a long moment, Lucy and the horse simply existed in each other's company, the redwood forest looming around them like silent witnesses. She could hear her heartbeat echo in her ears. The first question that flitted through her mind was practical. Could this horse help her find the way out? She didn't know where the horse had come from. It had no saddle or bridle, no visible brand to mark ownership. It might have been feral, or perhaps an escapee from a nearby ranch that had turned wild over time. Yet it was healthy, powerful, and seemed oddly comfortable near her. The horse shifted, turning its head as though beckoning her deeper into the forest. Lucy hesitated. She recalled the story of how certain cultures believed horses to be spirit guides, bridging earthly realms and mystical ones. Though she was just a child, the thought thrilled her. She patted the horse's mane gently. The hair felt coarse, yet strong, like living silk. The horse nickered softly, stepping forward. Lucy followed, trusting an instinct she couldn't articulate. They traversed over a series of winding paths, stepping around half-buried roots and weaving between trees so tall they seemed to vanish into the heavens. Every so often, the stallion would pause, ears swiveling to catch some distant sound. Lucy, heart pounding, would look around, half expecting to see her parents searching frantically. Yet the forest was still. No distant calls of her name reached her ears. A few times, Lucy stumbled, scraping her knee or brushing against a thorny vine. The horse would pause, as if waiting for her to collect herself, then continue. Their trek felt endless, bathed in an otherworldly light, filtering through the canopy overhead. Lucy kept glancing at her silent companion. Perhaps it was a trick of the light, but she swore she saw sorrow in the horse's eyes, a reflection of her own longing. She wondered, could it possibly sense my fear and loneliness? Deeper they went, and Lucy started to wonder if the horse truly knew the way. Her stomach growled. She realized she hadn't eaten since breakfast, and in her rush that morning, she'd neglected to carry snacks in her small backpack. She tried not to panic, focusing instead on placing one foot in front of the other. The unwavering presence of the stallion was the only anchor to hope she had. As they journeyed, Lucy's mind drifted to stories her grandmother used to tell her about horses and how they often appeared in times of great need. She remembered how, in old ranching families, a loyal horse could mean the difference between survival and despair. Her grandmother had once mentioned that if you look into a horse's eyes, you can sometimes see its memories and heartbreak, as though the animal has lived entire lifetimes alongside humanity. Lucy wondered what heartbreak this particular horse carried in its spirit. She noticed something else strange, old scars on the animal's flank, thin lines crossing in a pattern that might have been from barbed wire or some prior accident. Whatever their origin, the stallion wore them like badges of endurance. It struck Lucy how animals, like people, carried their past etched upon them. She felt a pang of empathy, reminded of how her parents had lately seemed weighed down by unspoken troubles. They continued walking for what felt like hours. Tall ferns brushed Lucy's ankles. Light shafts speared through the canopy, painting surreal patterns on the forest floor. Sometimes the horse would pause, lift its head, and whinny softly, as though calling out for something or someone. The calls dissipated into the hush, unanswered, leaving the pair to press on. Lucy was nearing the point of exhaustion, but something about the horse's presence kept her spirit afloat. Finally, they arrived at a narrow creek, its waters gurgling over rocks worn smooth by time. Lucy knelt and drank greedily, ignoring the earthy taste. She splashed water on her face, letting the cold shock awaken her senses. The horse drank too, lowering its regal head toward the rushing water. Then it lifted its muzzle, water dripping from its whiskers, and gazed at Lucy, as if to say, "We must continue." Meanwhile, Dan and Jacqueline Henderson were frantic. After the first hour of fruitless searching, they contacted the park rangers. Rangers from Redwood National Park swiftly organized a search party, scattering through trails and vantage points. They carried radio devices, flashlights, and first aid kits, calling Lucy's name. But the forest was vast, and daylight was beginning to fade. Jacqueline was consumed by guilt. She blamed herself for not keeping a closer eye on Lucy. Dan was equally distraught, questioning why he had let Lucy wander ahead. The tension between them, simmering over the last few months, flared under the pressure. Harsh words were exchanged, regrets uttered, then tears and embraces followed, each of them realizing that they shared the same terror, losing their daughter. They took to separate directions in the forest, under the guidance of the rangers, hearts pounding with dread. Evening shadows stretched across the ground, turning the colossal redwoods into towering silhouettes. The search team's flashlights cut through the gathering gloom like beacons of desperation. Dan repeatedly shouted Lucy's name until his voice cracked, ignoring the pain in his throat. Jacqueline tripped several times, scraping her palms and knees, but rose again, refusing to give up. Neither of them could forget Lucy's vibrant smile from that morning. Now, that memory haunted them, fueling their determination to find her safe. By late afternoon, Lucy and the stallion reached a place where the forest opened into a small, mossy glade. Fallen trees lay crisscrossed, and sunlight found its way through an opening in the canopy, highlighting a circle of soft grasses. Exhausted and overwhelmed, Lucy sank down to rest. The horse stood beside her, muscles quivering slightly from the long trek. She felt a pang of gratitude. She had no words for this wild creature, was her only companion, her only guide. She rummaged through her backpack, hoping she had at least some crackers or a granola bar tucked away from a previous trip. To her relief, she found half a protein bar. She split it, offering a piece to the horse. The stallion sniffed cautiously, lips brushing over her palm. Lucy giggled softly through her tears. So even a wild horse could appreciate some peanut butter chocolate goodness, she mused. Night was coming. The thick canopy overhead signaled darkness would be intense. She looked around, noticing a natural overhang formed by a partially uprooted tree, its massive root system creating a small cave-like area. Though it was far from comfortable, it might shield her from the chill. But what if her parents and the rangers were out looking for her right now? Should she keep moving? Lucy shivered, recalling her father's advice. If lost, sometimes the safest option at night is to stay put. You won't get more lost, and search parties can find you more easily if you aren't constantly on the move. Reluctantly, she decided to stay. Gathering armfuls of fallen leaves for insulation, she crawled beneath the overhang. The stallion lingered a few feet away, pawing at the ground, seemingly uncertain of this human choice. "Good night," Lucy whispered to the horse, a mixture of fear and gratitude welling up in her chest. "Please don't leave me." She wasn't sure if the creature understood, but somehow she felt it did. That night, Lucy huddled in the musty darkness, listening to every rustle and snap of twigs in the forest beyond. Occasionally, she heard the horse stir. She pictured it standing guard, ears alert. Each time her mind conjured frightening images, a bear sniffing around or a sudden ghostly shape drifting through the trees, she reminded herself she wasn't truly alone. The presence of her silent protector gave her courage. Morning arrived with weak, filtered light. Lucy emerged from the makeshift shelter, stiff, limbed, and achy. The stallion greeted her with a soft nicker. She felt a flicker of relief. It hadn't abandoned her. She attempted to stand, nearly losing her balance on fatigued legs. Hunger gnawed at her stomach. Without any more food, she would have to rely on creek water and her own endurance. The previous day's sense of awe had transformed into grim necessity. She had to find help or be found. The stallion tossed its head and trotted a few steps, pausing to look back at Lucy. She followed, half stumbling. The forest seemed denser in the morning light, as though it had drawn its cloak tighter around them. They pressed on, weaving through colossal trunks, guided by the horse's mysterious path. Lucy's thoughts flitted between faith and doubt. What if the horse is lost too? She wondered. Still, it showed no sign of aimlessness. It walked with an odd sense of purpose. As they moved deeper, Lucy began to notice subtle changes in the foliage. Patches of ferns gave way to dense thickets. The ground cover shifted, and the canopy overhead took on new shapes. She recognized none of it, but the horse pressed on, stopping now and then to sniff the air or paw at the ground. Maybe it's searching for something, Lucy guessed. Food, a salt lick, or safety? That was when they found the old cabin. Surrounded by tall grasses and partially obscured by towering ferns, a small wooden structure leaned against the living backdrop of the forest. At first glance, Lucy thought it was abandoned. Its walls were grey with rot, and the door hung crooked on rusty hinges. Yet the sight ignited hope in her chest. Where there's a cabin, there might be people or supplies. Approaching cautiously, Lucy pushed the door. It creaked open, revealing dust motes swirling in the stale air. The single-room interior contained a rickety table, a chair missing a leg, and empty shelves. The roof had a gaping hole, and a broken window permitted a beam of sunlight that illuminated the floating dust. Lucy sighed. There were no immediate signs of occupancy. She wondered how long it had stood empty. She rummaged around for anything useful, dried goods, a working radio, a flashlight. She found none of those, just a few rusted cans, a deteriorated blanket, and brittle pages from old newspapers. Disappointment settled in her stomach like a stone. Still, a structure was a structure better than another night under a root overhang. She looked at the stallion, which had peered inside but remained in the clearing. It snorted and backed away. Lucy interpreted that as reluctance to enter the cramped quarters. Deciding not to linger too long, Lucy took the blanket. Although it was musty and full of holes, it offered some small comfort. She patted the horse's flank, voice wavering. "Thank you for bringing me here, but we should keep going. I don't want to stay lost forever." They ventured on. Every step took a toll, Lucy's hunger growing like a dull ache in her gut. She tried to focus on positive thoughts, her parents, the rangers, how proud she was of her own resilience so far. She would not let fear win. She had a new friend, this remarkable stallion, and together they would find a way. Time blurred. Lucy stumbled often. Midway through the afternoon, they crested a small rise. Through breaks in the trees, Lucy glimpsed a breathtaking panorama of redwood groves stretching into the distance. Rays of sunlight pierced the canopy, forming golden columns in the air. For a fleeting moment, she felt peace, as though nature's beauty offered solace in her darkest hour. Then she heard something, distant voices. She strained her ears, listening hard. Yes, there it was again, faint but distinct. A wave of relief washed over her. She wasn't alone in this green sea. There were people nearby. She dashed forward, ignoring the ache in her feet, only to realize the horse stayed behind, watching her run ahead. She almost cried out for the horse to hurry, but an inexplicable stillness in its gaze stopped her. The stallion stared back at her, and Lucy sensed a profound weight behind those eyes, as though it had guided her this far, but this was the boundary of their shared path. She took a step closer, heart clenching. "Come on," she whispered. "They can help you too." The stallion jerked its head to the side, mane rippling. Then it lowered its muzzle and took a few paces back. Lucy felt tears burning her eyes. She realized that perhaps this majestic animal belonged to these woods in a way she never could. Maybe it sought to help her get out, but its own journey demanded it stay. Before she could process the swirl of emotions, the horse nickered softly, turned, and galloped away into the forest, its chestnut coat vanishing among the redwood trunks like a fleeting memory. Heart racing, Lucy shouted, "Thank you!" into the quiet gloom. She felt both relieved and heartbreakingly lonely. That brief bond would be etched into her forever. She wiped away tears, inhaled the tangy scent of moss and bark, and set off toward the distant voices. Chapter 10, Rescue and Revelation. It wasn't long before Lucy crashed through a tangle of ferns and almost collided with a group of park rangers. Shocked exclamations filled the air. They quickly radioed in, letting everyone know the missing child had been found. Within minutes, Dan and Jacqueline arrived, tears streaming down their faces. They scooped Lucy into a crushing embrace. The weight of terror that had pressed on them for nearly 2 days lifted in an instant, replaced by grateful sobs and endless kisses on Lucy's mud-streaked cheeks. Paramedics on the scene checked her vital signs. Lucy was dehydrated and hungry, but otherwise miraculously unharmed. Between thirsty gulps of water, she recounted how a wild horse had guided her. The rangers exchanged puzzled looks. While Redwood National Park was home to many creatures, a lone wild horse was not typical. Some rangers speculated it might be a lost Mustang from a small band that sometimes roamed near private ranches on the park's fringes. Others said Lucy must have been hallucinating from exhaustion, but Lucy insisted it was real, describing every detail of its coat, eyes, and scars. That night, back at the main ranger station, Lucy and her parents sat around a table, sipping hot cocoa provided by a kind ranger named Mark Turner. Mark listened patiently, his brow furrowed in wonder. "I've worked here for over 10 years, he said. "Heard rumors of a solitary horse that roams the redwood fringes. Locals sometimes call it Spirit, but no one's confirmed it. They say it has scars from barbed wire and an uncanny sense for finding lost animals, maybe even lost people. You might have encountered him." Lucy's chest fluttered. "Spirit," she repeated silently, her imagination catching fire. Dan and Jacqueline, overwhelmed with relief, held Lucy close. They asked about her well-being, apologized for letting her out of their sight. Lucy felt a complex mix of guilt and wonder, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that the stallion's intervention wasn't mere coincidence. Something deeper, more mystical, had transpired. In the weeks following her rescue, Lucy found it hard to return to normal life. She had vivid dreams of the redwood forest, of running alongside the stallion through moonlit clearings. Occasionally, she'd wake in tears, longing for that sense of connection she had felt so acutely. Part of her yearned to return to Redwood National Park, comb the trails, and find the horse again to properly thank it, maybe even befriend it. But she was only 10, and the rational adult world weighed heavily around her. Her parents, grateful to have her home and safe, tried to address the unspoken rift that had tugged at them for months. Lucy overheard snatches of conversations, money troubles, her mother's health scare. She realized how fear had colored their summer trip, how love had been overshadowed by uncertainty. In some strange way, Lucy's experience in the forest had galvanized them. They sought counseling, made more time for each other, and the tension in their home eased. The redwood scare had reminded them of life's fragility and of how fiercely they cherished their daughter. Yet Lucy's memories of the stallion refused to fade. She was convinced it had saved her life. Without its guidance, she might never have found the rangers' voices. She noticed an odd correlation. Each time she felt worried about her parents' problems, a fleeting image of the horse would appear in her mind. steadying her heart. It was as though some intangible bond had formed, transcending logic or distance. Autumn arrived, and Lucy's longing for the redwood forest intensified. She begged her parents to revisit, to see if the horse could be found. Initially, they refused. The memory was too raw, the danger too real. But as months rolled by and winter began to recede, Dan and Jacqueline decided to surprise Lucy. They had resolved to face their fears and to show Lucy that sometimes the best way to heal from trauma is to confront it with gratitude. One cool, bright morning in early spring, the Hendersons packed up their SUV and headed north. Lucy's excitement soared. She stared out the window, heart pounding with anticipation at the sight of familiar coastal highways and the towering silhouettes of redwoods in the distance. This time, they would stay in a nearby lodge instead of camping, partly for safety and partly because they wanted to ease back into the forest's embrace slowly. On the second day of their visit, Lucy joined a guided ranger tour, wearing proper hiking shoes and carrying a backpack loaded with water and snacks. Dan and Jacqueline hovered protectively, but they allowed Lucy a measure of independence. The group's leader was none other than Mark Turner, the ranger who had listened compassionately to Lucy's story months earlier. The group walked along a well-traveled trail, pausing to admire the gargantuan redwoods and the thriving ecosystem hidden in their shadows. Lucy kept her eyes peeled, scanning every patch of fern, every glade for a glimpse of chestnut hide. But hours passed with no sign of her fabled rescuer. As the sun dipped toward late afternoon, the group prepared to return. Just as Lucy was about to resign herself to disappointment, a hush fell over the group. Someone pointed toward a far slope, where a break in the trees opened to a small meadow. There, standing in the golden light of dusk, was a lone stallion. The horse's coat glowed copper beneath the sun's final rays, its dark mane rippling like liquid night. Lucy's heart hammered. It's him. She broke from the group's side, ignoring her parents' startled cries and the ranger's calls to wait. Something in her chest propelled her forward. As she approached the meadow, the stallion lifted its head. The air seemed charged, thick with memory and magic. Lucy slowed her steps, raising her hands in a calming gesture. Their eyes met. She sensed recognition in that silent gaze, as if the months apart had been but a moment. The horse bowed its head slightly, stomping once. Lucy felt tears prickle her eyes. She reached out, heart thundering. Yet this time she stopped a few feet short, waiting for the horse to bridge the final gap. Seconds stretched. Then, gently, it stepped forward. Its muzzle brushed her fingertips. Lucy gasped in gratitude and wonder. Behind her, Dan and Jacqueline stood at a respectful distance, feeling their own eyes grow misty. Ranger Mark Turner held a camera, capturing what might be the first recorded evidence of this elusive stallion. But he too was overwhelmed, sensing something sacred unfolding. As Lucy petted the horse's mane, she felt a soft sense of electricity, like two spirits speaking without words. The stallion's dark eyes flickered, revealing depths Lucy wished she could fathom. Overcome by emotion, she whispered, "Thank you for saving me." A quiet presence emerged from the far side of the meadow, an older man in faded jeans and a flannel shirt, his grey hair tied back in a ponytail. He carried a lariat in one hand, but made no move to use it. His expression was gentle, kind. Lucy took a step back, unsure whether the man posed a threat. The horse startled slightly, snorting. The man raised both hands in a placating gesture, his voice low. "Easy there, boy, easy." He turned to Lucy. "You must be the kid I heard about," he said softly, an edge of amazement in his tone. "The one this horse guided to safety." Lucy glanced at her parents, who had caught up now. Ranger Mark Turner approached, frowning in recognition. "Shane Lawson," he greeted. "I haven't seen you around these parts in a while." Shane nodded, stroking his beard. "I was away," caring for my sister in Crescent City. Heard rumors about this stallion leading a lost girl to the search party. Figured I'd check on him. His gaze returned to Lucy. You see, I found him years ago, tangled in barbed wire on the outskirts of a ranch near Oric. Took me hours to free him. Never belonged to anyone. He's lived out here ever since. Lucy sensed there was more to the story. Dan spoke up, voice tentative. Do you know why he would help our daughter? Shane shrugged, eyes flicking to the horse. I've known animals all my life. Some folks think they're guided by survival alone, but I've seen enough to believe they can have hearts as big as the sky. This horse especially. He's always had a knack for turning up when someone's in trouble. I couldn't catch him then, and I'm not trying to now, but I do believe he has some bigger purpose out here. Shane let out a breath. I almost lost hope that day. I was having a tough time. My fiancé had passed away. It was the darkest day of my life. But there he was, tangled in wire near the ranch boundary. Helping him gave me a reason to keep living. Sometimes I think we saved each other. A tremor of emotion ran through Lucy. This was bigger than a random forest encounter. The stallion had a history of heartbreak and resilience, and in saving Lucy, perhaps he was continuing a cycle of compassion begun by Shane. Lucy stroked the horse's scarred flank, her throat tightening. An image flashed in her mind, her parents' tear-streaked faces, the relief when they found her safe. She whispered, "Thank you," again, feeling gratitude deeper than words could capture. In that meadow, as shadows lengthened, Lucy understood that her bond with the horse was part of an intricate tapestry of healing. The redwood forest was not just a place of ancient trees and quiet trails. It was an arena of spirit, where lives intertwined in moments that could transform everything. She saw the tears glistening in her mother's eyes, the awe in her father's. They had all suffered in their own ways, Jacqueline with her health scares, Dan with the fear of failing his family, Lucy with the terror of losing them in the forest. And the stallion, known as Spirit or whatever name it might claim, carried its own silent sorrows. The truth behind the horse's rescue was not just about a lost child in the woods. It was about a wild, wounded spirit responding to Lucy's innocence and need, forging a bond that defied the boundaries between species. It was about how heartbreak can become empathy, how scars, whether on a horse's flank or a person's soul, are not just reminders of pain, but also testaments to survival. Understanding lit Lucy's mind like a sunrise. A tear slipped down her cheek, but it wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of awe, gratitude and love. Jacqueline moved closer, placing a hand on Lucy's shoulder. In a hushed voice, she murmured, "We owe him a debt we can never repay." Dan nodded, eyes shining with unshed tears. Shane smiled softly. "You already repaid it. You're here, living your life, growing stronger. That's what matters." In the following days, Lucy and her parents remained near Redwood National Park, visiting the meadow where they'd first truly met the stallion. Sometimes the horse appeared, sometimes not. Shane Lawson offered gentle guidance, explaining how to respect the stallion's freedom. Lucy never tried to ride him or rope him. She simply cherished moments when he'd let her stroke his muzzle, offering silent gratitude for the life he'd helped her keep. Over time, Lucy's parents also found a certain peace in those quiet, magical encounters. They felt the heaviness in their marriage lift. Their difficulties hadn't vanished, but they now faced them as a united front, anchored by renewed appreciation for each other and for Lucy. The redwood forest itself seemed to hum with a deeper resonance for Lucy. Every towering trunk, every gentle fern, every shaft of sunlight reminded her how vast and interconnected life could be. She learned that resilience wasn't about never being afraid. It was about moving forward despite fear, trusting that help could appear in the most unexpected forms. She learned that connection wasn't limited to family, friends, or humans. Sometimes it spanned species, bridging hearts through shared struggle and empathy. Most importantly, she learned that personal growth often blossomed from harrowing experiences, sowing seeds of wisdom and compassion in the aftermath of darkness. Each time Lucy left the redwood groves, tears stung her eyes, yet she felt stronger, braver, filled with a sense of purpose. She pledged to honor the stallion's gift by living with kindness and courage. She volunteered at local horse rescues near Santa Rosa, learning to groom and feed horses, listening to their soft nickers, mindful of the great capacity for empathy they bore. Her parents supported her wholeheartedly. In turn, Lucy watched as her mother's health improved through attentive care, and her father found new passion in his work, unburdened by the fear of losing what he cherished most. Years passed. Lucy grew into a determined teenager who never forgot that day, nor the stallion who had guided her when all hope seemed lost. Sometimes she returned to Redwood National Park with her parents. Occasionally, they caught a glimpse of the horse in the distance, almost mythical, as though watching over them. Rumors grew among hikers and rangers about sightings of a solitary chestnut stallion with dark, flowing mane and scars that spoke of a difficult past. Some claimed to have been guided by him when they lost their way. Others scoffed at the idea, calling it the stuff of legend. But Lucy knew better. She wrote essays about the experience for her school assignments, describing not just the events but the profound lessons gleaned. People asked if she exaggerated. She didn't mind the skepticism. The truth was a private treasure in her heart, shining more brightly than any outside validation. For Lucy, what happened in those giant ancient woods wasn't just an adventure story. It was a revelation, one that affirmed the power of resilience, the beauty of interspecies connection, and the unstoppable force of love born from compassion. One day, as Lucy walked the redwood trails alone, much older, more cautious, yet equally curious, she paused at a certain glade. Her mind drifted to that first night, how frightened she'd been, how the horse had stood guard. Tears slipped down her cheeks in gratitude for everything that had transpired since. She closed her eyes, feeling a soft breeze across her face. For a moment, she imagined the stallion was right behind her, breathing warmth onto her shoulder, reminding her that even in the darkest forests, light can be found if you stay open to it. When she opened her eyes, she saw a flash of chestnut move beyond the ferns. Heart pounding, she held her breath. There you are. Although she caught only a glimpse before he vanished into the green cathedral, it felt like a blessing, a living reminder that magic still existed in the world. Thank you for journeying with Lucy into the heart of the ancient redwoods and discovering a bond beyond words, a wild horse that reached across fear and darkness to guide a lost girl home. Their story reminds us that compassion, resilience, and connection can triumph, even against towering odds. Whether we face everyday challenges or life's greatest storms, that flicker of hope may come in unexpected shapes and forms a guiding hand, a caring spirit, a humble animal's silent devotion. If this story touched your heart, please show your support by hitting the like button and sharing it with friends who might need a reminder of life's hidden wonders. And don't forget to subscribe for more tales that celebrate the bravery in us all. Together, let's keep the spirit of the redwood forest alive, shining as a beacon of hope in our everyday lives.